In this video, I am going to teach you a skill that has changed my life for the better. And that is how to use gratitude to master the inner critic in your mind. And here's the reason why it's so imperative that I can share this with you. Because if we as humans do not master what's going on up here, it will master us. And why would we want to do that when we have the capacity to be able to be the master of that inner critic? And by the way, if you don't know what I'm talking about when I'm saying the inner critic, you might have heard it called other ways. You might have called it other things in your own life, like that's the monkey mind, it's the mind chatter, it's the voice, as we call it in life on our terms. Or you might have heard it as the itty-bitty-shitty committee in your head, which is possibly my favorite to call it when that happens. But that voice shows up in ways that really debilitates our lives and prevents us from living that life on our terms. It shows up in business meetings or professional meetings or group meetings where it's like, no, don't speak up. Whatever you do, they're not going to like you. You're going to be made fun of. You're going to get fired, right? And so that's what the inner critic says. Like, I've got a lot of friends dating, and of course I dated before meeting Lauren, and luckily I met Lauren, but there was that inner voice in my head like, don't ask that person out. Or don't ask that person how they feel about you, because you might find out the truth. And that's what the itty committee says to me all the time. And then a lot of times that inner critic says things like, you know what, I know you're hungry, but you got to keep plowing through. Because if you don't plow through, you're going to be rejected from the tribe, or whatever it means. And so your needs don't get met. And so when the inner critic is the master of me, I'd imagine for you it might show up differently. Again, it prevents me from meeting my needs, and it keeps me in toxic situations because the voice is like, we know this world, we know this person, we know this job, we know this environment, we know this. And the voice is like, don't change things we already know. And so we stay in toxic scenarios. Think of it right now. What's a toxic scenario you're in because that inner critic is like, don't change this. It's going to screw up everything. We're going to lose the stability we have even though it's toxic. And it just, for me, I listened to that voice so much for so many times that it stopped me from pursuing my dreams. There was probably a 10-year period where I really allowed that inner critic to get really loud. And it stunted my ability to make an impact, whether it's doing retreats or the gratitude slam on Facebook, whatever it is. And the voice was like, don't do that. Don't do that. People won't like you. They'll just make fun of you. And here's what I've learned in researching is I'll never be able to eradicate that voice. The inner critic is always going to be there. It's been there since the beginning of humanity. You know, some people call it the ego. You know, it's nature. And I know this sounds pessimistic for me to say, but you're never going to be, you and I, at least in our lifetime, maybe something will come about to reverse this, but I don't see it. We'll never be stronger than nature. But here's the optimistic side. We can, from this day on, always be smarter than nature. You can't be stronger than the ocean. You can't go to the ocean, come at me. I mean, it's going to gobble you right up, right? But you can say, I'm going to build a boat. Or, you know what, I'm going to fly over it. So we can be smarter than nature. And that inner critic had me sitting in darkness for such a long period of time. As I said, it stopped me from pursuing my dreams. How does that inner critic stop you from pursuing your dreams? And I was getting really angry at myself because I was listening to the inner critic. I really believed it was saying, you're not good enough for this. You're not strong enough for this. You don't have the skill set for this. And I started getting angry at myself and being like, I am not good enough. What's wrong with me? And then when I was over that, I started blaming other people. Have you ever blamed other people for you listening to your inner critic? Really, think about that. When's the time when you blamed other people because you listened to your inner critic? And then when I was done blaming other people, I got angry at myself again. And then I'm in the vicious cycle of the dragon eating its tail, the snake eating its tail. And it doesn't serve us. So I want to give you a solution to never have to, or to mitigate that inner critic. Okay? And the first thing is just make a commitment. All right. So I used to see that inner critic as an enemy. I used to see that inner critic as it was against me. But when I was trained by a mentor in my life to go, that inner critic's not against you. The inner critic's just trying to keep you alive. That's it. So I converted my anger and hatred for that inner critic into gratitude. And I was like, thank you so much for protecting me. Thank you so much for watching out for my best interest. How amazing that I have a ally on my side. And like anything else with gratitude, as you practice gratitude, it changes the way you see things. As Dr. Wayne Dyer said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And gratitude helps us change the way we look at things. So I'm going to give you the formula in one moment, because I want you to be able to start acting on your needs. I want you to be able to start setting boundaries in your professional and personal relationships even more than you already are right now. I want you to have less guilt and anxiety. And I want to give you a warning here. It might even be scary as you start to practice these 3 steps. I'm going to give you 3 steps. They're so easy. It's like, how come I didn't know about these 3 steps? Why did someone not teach me these 3 steps in kindergarten? And don't you worry, I'm working on getting this one into kindergarten because it works really well for me and it'll work for others. Here's the 3 steps. Step 1, when the inner critic acts up and the inner critic says, you're not good enough to have this conversation, or whatever the inner critic is saying. Step 1, offer it gratitude. Thank you so much for watching after me. Thank you, inner critic, for watching after me. Step 2, ask it for its concern. Just go right in. What are you most concerned of? And the inner critic will speak back. He'll come up with some sort of answer, or maybe journal it, or just ask it. It goes, well, because you're not good enough for this, they're gonna dismiss you. So just stay quiet. Oh, okay. You think they're gonna dismiss me? So that's ask for the concern. And step 3 is set a boundary. Hey, I'm gonna have this conversation. It's a non-negotiable. It's important to me. It's gonna help me live a life on my terms. So thank you. I heard you. You helped me a lot. But this one, the boundary is I'm having this conversation. And then I go off and I have that conversation. So it'll just look like this for me, as a matter of fact. Recently I had friends come over to the office for a silent tea ceremony, which I've never done before with my friends, a group of friends. And the inner critic was like, don't do this. Everyone's going to be uncomfortable. They're really not going to like you very much, right? And so I was like, oh, so I canceled it. I actually did it. I actually canceled it. And I went through the 3 steps a day later. And I said, hey, you know what? Yesterday I canceled the tea practice, and I'm so grateful that you are out for my best interest. So thank you for watching out for me. Step 2, I asked for the concern. What are you really worried about? I'm really worried about that you're going to be made fun of, that you're going to make a lot of people uncomfortable, that people will start fighting in the room. And okay. And step 3 was set a boundary. I said, no, I really want to incorporate tea into my life, even with my friendships more. I'm doing this, and I want to create an environment where I introduce people to tea. And that's success for me, is that I'm just introducing people to what silent tea sounds like. And guess what? I did it. And it to this day is possibly one of my favorite days of my life. And it didn't only last an hour. It went 5 hours long. It was just such a beautiful experience. So, step 1, offer gratitude. Step 2, ask the concern. Step 3, set a boundary. All with the inner critic. All with the inner critic. So this is just you. So you have the capacity to master your inner critic. And I want you to remember that. And it takes practice. And you're going to fail. And some days the inner critic's going to be louder than you. And that's okay. Our goal is not to have this major earth-shattering breakthrough. The goal is to move the needle. To be able to have better dialogue with the inner critic. Because it's there to protect us. But we have to be able to recognize, when is it the inner critic and when is it me? When is it you? You deserve a life on your terms. You deserve peace inside of you and fulfillment. And learning to become a master of that inner critic, using gratitude, is a sure way to have that life on your terms, inner peace, and fulfillment. Let me know how it goes.